Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Granite Mountain Movie Club. Today's episode is on the book Heat 2, which is a sequel to the film Heat. And as you might know, I'm doing a series of episodes on Heat, which turns 30 in a couple weeks. So I'm sort of celebrating that anniversary. We try and keep the spoilers after the 30-minute mark. So up to about 30 minutes, you're safe in terms of spoilers. I recommend listening to the Heat 2 audiobook. It's a lot of fun. But check out the episode, of course, as well. Normally I do quite a bit of editing, like audio editing. I didn't really bother this time. I felt like the conversation was fluid enough that I didn't really need to cut anything out. There might be some background noise that I would normally not have there, but whatever, it's going to be there. That's fine. I don't have a lot of time this holiday season to do much editing. The other thing would be to check out the show's sponsor, exitgroup.us. I'm looking at their site right now, just in case you're curious what Exit really is. Here's how they describe themselves. Exit is a fraternity of like-minded men who take a short position in the present system and build for what comes next. So if that sounds appealing to you, and I hope it does, go check out exitgroup.us. And with that, let's jump into the show. Okay, let's jump in. Welcome, everyone, to the Granite Mountain Movie Club. I am your host. I go by Granite. We're doing something that I think is cool. We're going to be, over the next couple weeks, I'm going to be doing a bunch of episodes on the film Heat, which, came out 30 years ago in December. So it came out December 1995. And part of this little series I'm doing is I'm going to be looking at the new book, somewhat new, I think it was 2022. Heat 2. So Michael Mann went and wrote a book as a sequel and prequel to the movie Heat. So we're going to be looking at that as part of this series. But yeah, so I got Arturo here. How are you doing, Arturo?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to talk about this book, which I first read earlier this year. I guess because there have been talks about finally making it into a film or finally having a Heat sequel. I figured I would. Part of me wanted to not read the novel because I was like, well, it might be interesting to go into the film, not knowing what to expect. But I read it, and I think it's definitely a rich text that will give us a lot to talk about. So I'm excited to get into that.
Yeah. And then we got Degree Studies here. How are you doing, Degree Studies?
I'm good. Happy to be with you.
We got the A-list crew here today this is a Highline crew. Is this a Highline crew? Us three?
Absolutely. Coast to coast Highline crew.
Yeah, they keep saying Mann co-wrote this book with this woman, Meg Gardner, who is like a established thriller writer. I guess I've never read her stuff, but she's got her own series and her own intellectual property. So she's a known entity, and he, I guess, I watched an interview with her. I'm not sure how he found her. I think he got do you guys know Don Winslow, the author?
Yes. So sorry to interject, but I read Savages when it first came out, and I hated it so much that I had a negative attachment to Don Winslow. And even so, the people who don't know who Don Winslow is won't know what I'm talking about, but there was something very odious and negative about this guy's persona. He even put at the front of his book, thanks to Quentin Tarantino for seeing my hardcore vision of the war against the cartels. And then, smash cut to 2 years later, and he is the premier Twitter advertiser of Blue Anon anti-Trump conspiracies, which is, you must see those too, Granite, right? Where it's
oh yeah, I see Don Winslow.
Yeah, it's very strange because I don't know if you've seen the movie Savages or read the book, but it's such a good point for you to bring up because Don Winslow is almost what if you took Michael Mann and removed all the testosterone from his balls, but were like, you still have to pretend to be like a misogynistic psycho who only sees the world through like testosterone tinted glasses, but you're actually like a eunuch who's never wanted to have sex with anything and hates their own existence. That is Don Winslow.
Yeah, I think I read like The Force. No, it was older. I read some of his older stuff like 15 years ago. Maybe it was The Cartel. That was 10 years ago, I guess. Maybe I think I read Power of the Dog. I think that's a movie, right? Anyway, I read a couple of his things and I remember thinking like, I remember thinking he was kind of lame. Like he overdoes it a lot in his books. There was a lot of these like really kind of goofy scenes of violence. But then I was very surprised, when I found out he was basically just like Stephen King online. That's how he behaves, like this very wimpy.
He is libtarded Michael Mann because he actually has I didn't like Savages, which is the first of his sort of cartel books, and I think he's written more. But he wrote, I don't know if he's from DC or just has an interest in DC, but he wrote a detective series about a sort of mixed race private investigator in DC, and like you can imagine the exposition. It's sort of like it's like it's like Socrates Cunningham woke up in Northeast DC. The promise of Obama was dead, and he knew he had to protect himself. And then the story will proceed from there, and like you're sort of like, wait, is this a 60-year-old like white retard? Like, who's writing this book? And it's funny because I like Heat 2 so much, and I think I feel so compelled to like defend the Gen X or Boomer retardation that goes into the production of something like Heat 2, and it's almost like you could say something like, Don Winslow is so politicized that his sort of boomer naivete is rendered like totally inert because it's too full of political cliches or whatever, but somehow like the same dumb masculinity and like reflexive testosterone in the hands of Michael Mann is extremely entertaining. And so we can get into that, but that's my.
Well, I bring him up because I think if I understood the interview correctly, I think he might have recommended this Meg Gardner woman. I think it might have been him who like connected those dots for Mann, or maybe not, but that's kind of what I thought she said. So she like paired up with Michael Mann. I'm not sure, how much like writing he really did, other than she said that she met with him a bunch, like lots of very long meetings, and he already had the story all fleshed out. Like he already knew exactly what he wanted to do, and you can tell when you're reading this, like, oh, these are the little like paper dolls in his head. He has been thinking about these characters the entire 30 years since the movie.
Yes.
Well, even before, right? Even before, because Heat wasn't even the first time he made that movie. He made a TV movie, or a TV pilot that was basically the entire plot of Heat. So he's been thinking about this story for probably 40 years or more. So he already knew what he wanted to do. So, and I guess she wrote a lot. I don't know how much, like she probably filled in all the filler, but
yeah, I mean, it's a pretty long book. So I imagine a lot of like actual, the typing, writing was done by her. But to your point about how he like had these characters fleshed out, like I know when he was on the Rewatchables for the third Heat podcast that they did, he mentioned how, or like he implied or alluded to the fact that like the character descriptions that are in this book, they're like things that we wouldn't have known just from watching the movie. Like he already had all that stuff like planned out, in 1995 when they were making the movie. So like almost 30 years later, I guess like when he's having those meetings there and he's describing like, the fact that Vincent Hanna went to Vietnam or whatever, like it sounds like it is so much in his voice. Like it seems like it's verbatim, like what he would have told her, like what he's been thinking about for at least 30 years. So definitely is, even if he didn't, even if, a lot of it was probably not, he didn't like sit there, smoking a cigarette by a typewriter. It definitely is in his voice, very much so. And
real quick, I should say, I think maybe what we can aim to do here is in try and go spoiler free as long as we can. And I mean, when I guess the dam will burst at some point, we'll have to jump into spoilers, but we'll try and go spoiler free as long as we can for people who don't want to.
Be like, did Chris and Anna fuck? Yeah, they did.
Yeah. So, it is interesting. If he really did have this plot already known in his head when he made Heat, I do think he would have done some things a little differently. Because it's a little weird. Some of the events in the book, because it's prequel and sequel, some of the events in the book are so important that, like, some of the things that happen before they do the big bank heist that you see in the movie, like that would have, some of the things that happened before that were so big that, like, you would have had some indication of that in the Heat movie if he had really known that.
No, yeah,
like
that's I guess I can't get into this without doing spoilers, granted, but if I'm going to pick up on what you're saying, that claim is total bullshit. The reason why is that Neil, I think, this is just my take or whatever, but we are supposed to think in the movie Heat that Neil has not felt love in decades, I think, or maybe at all in his adult life, that he's been so focused on crime and his craft that he has had no room for human relationships, and that the time in the film where this frizzy-haired woman at the bookstore like breaks through his shell is the first time that that's happened in his adult life. To me, there is nothing in the movie that suggests this man had a serious relationship relatively recently and even a child that he loved, but then closed himself off because of that. Like,
just to say, not his child, but a child that
right. And so, to me, that just seems like bullshit. To say he had a full, because that was one of the only things, as a real fan of the movie, the idea that because I think the type of thing that Michael Mann wouldn't see is like, okay, if you're following Neil as a fan, we now have two stories about Neil. And in both of the stories we have, his softness for a woman costs him everything. And so that actually suggests, as like a reader or a viewer, that he's a very like soft, empathetic person. But your presentation of him in both the Book of Heat 2 and the movie is like, this never happens except in the movie and the book, where he randomly fell in love. But he's actually incapable of love, but in the only two stories he falls deeply and completely in love. Like, it's bullshit. I think
also
I agree with you that it's bullshit, but I will just say that if you just take the text of Heat, the movie, he really does break his own rules all the time. So in that sense, I agreed. Like, I don't think, like, Mann clearly didn't have like that part of like the full plot of Heat 2. I don't think that he's had that in mind for 30 years. It was definitely retrofitted in a way that I think is ultimately unsatisfying. But I will say that, like, just the character of Neil Macaulay, like, he does always like sort of, his sentimentality towards Edie and also Chris really does dominate his character. So I actually don't think that it would be totally out of character. But yeah, I do agree that, like, the events, like the 1988 event series, like, it's like one too many times for it to not sort of, like, you can't go back to that well so recently in the chronology of the character.
To be clear, just quickly, sorry, but
you're good.
I don't think it makes the story worse at all. I just think, like, this is a classic example of the author not really knowing the deep truth that they're presenting, because I think Michael Mann thinks like the Neil Macaulay in Michael Mann's head is a man who never loves too much to get in the way of his goals, and Michael Mann believes that. But as the audience, you can actually zoom out and see, no, this is actually sort of a soft, empathetic man. But there's some like irony of artistry where Michael Mann is in fact better at presenting this character in a way because he doesn't even understand that the character is not what the character understands himself to be. Am I just babbling, or does this make sense? Where
no, I get what you mean.
Yeah.
It makes
I will say, here's my thing on reading the book. It's like you go to the scene in the movie where they're standing around the famous, the action is the juice scene. And if you watch that scene again and assuming, oh, hey, a few years earlier, this same crew had this like really kind of intense experience together, where they lost like kind of a crew member. That conversation in the movie wouldn't feel the same. They would have approached it more like, hey, well, the action is the juice, but remember what happened somewhat recently? Like maybe, yeah.
Right. His henchman would be like, hey, the action is the juice, but is our safe house arranged by the woman you've most loved of anything in your life and her young, innocent child?
Yeah. Why is a child within 200 miles of this operation is a good question. But okay, so Degree Studies, you already disclosed that you really liked this book, and this was your first time, right?
Yes.
Arturo, what do you think of the book?
I mean, I enjoyed it, but like I said, fundamentally, like I enjoy like spending time with the characters, and I do think that it sort of fleshes out their characterization in interesting ways. But I guess it fundamentally, my problem with it was just that it's not plausible that it does almost, like, I wouldn't say ruin the movie, I wouldn't be that dramatic about it, but it doesn't really like work, or like it almost does sort of take away from the things that were most interesting about like the psychology and the story of the original, which like Mann clearly like takes very seriously. Like, he talks about it. He is a very almost like self-serious sort of person about like the psychology of masculinity and like what he thinks. Like he's not just a crime picture. It's it's a serious, deep drama. But like this really is very like pulpy, and so it is sort of odd that like I find his psychology in that way fascinating. Like he creates these like really very action-packed and like just sort of intensely enjoyable things that are also like philosophically deep. But like I just wonder like how much of it like he admits to himself as like almost like candy. You know what I'm saying? Like it's enjoyable in like a pulpy way, but it does make me wonder about like how Mann sees himself. I don't know. I liked it, but it was a little like it's it's a crime novel. It's not like one of the great works of of literature.
Okay, Arturo, I need to ask you a question then, because I think I totally agree with you, but I want to know, like, I don't know how I want to ask this question, but it's like if you imagine in your mind the platonic ideal of an action movie director, do they understand that action movies are schlock genre fare, or do they think that they're making a movie about the Trojan War and the human condition, and that like this is the deepest shit that anyone has ever explored? Because I kind of think, especially when I interact with content from Michael Mann, I'm thinking now of the Miami Heat remake, or not? Sorry, Miami Vice remake.
And, LeBron and Dwayne Wade.
Yeah.
Decision. Yeah.
Udonis Haslam.
But
I'm thinking of Miami Vice and this book and the original Heat. That like I almost think part of what makes Michael Mann a genius, and I am prepared to call him a genius, is that he seems like this weird anachronism where he has no meta awareness of like the ways in which society has moved on from traditional masculinity. Like he will just, and I don't know whether to credit this to him or his co-author, who is very successful, and so maybe much of the credit is due to her, but like he will just present like he will have full paragraphs that are just like, I shot the man and that made me feel powerful, and when I felt powerful, blood rushed to my dick, and like I thought the world was mine. And there's no apparent irony or, it's not being examined, this attitude. He will just sort of depict like male aggression in a totally unironic and totally unself-reflective way that makes me think like yes, maybe he's not a genius, but this actually is extremely compelling, like in a market where every other artist is expressing their message with, you know, 1 to infinity layers of irony. Michael Mann is just being like, I like when men are tough and defeat other men. That there's something compelling about that, and that I think I totally agree that like the narrative and the message between the first Heat movie and this book are not consistent and make you skeptical of the idea that he really had the whole picture in mind. But what is consistent is like his lack of cynicism and his lack of irony.
Yeah. When you're talking about those unironic portrayals, some of the best parts of the book, and it's like they're the best in a couple of ways. I genuinely like these passages, but they're also funny when they're not meant to be funny. But it's like Chris, was driving in the fast lane. The blood was surging through his body. He wasn't on amphetamines. It was the feeling of opportunity. He hadn't felt like this since he did drugs. Like, just like very, and that's always been my thing with the movie too. Is that it from like the first couple scenes of the movie, it takes itself so seriously, but in a way that that sort of demands respect or demands like your acceptance. And it always worked for me.
That's why Mann is like, I do think he is like one of the greatest like directors of all time, and that's why like his shtick doesn't work as well. I mean, it is a little silly to read things like nothing is different 5 feet on this side of the line except everything. He's leaving the land of death, driving into the land of death. Neil, brother, Charlene, Dominic, somehow. So like it's cheesy, but I don't want to like laugh at it too much. But, like when you're able to depict it like in a movie, that lack of irony works much better. Do you know what I mean? Like he's a technical genius, and that's like why he's so good. Is like that sort of
No, totally. I'm sorry to.
When he's able to put it into an image, it's perfect. It's amazing. Like in Heat and like I'm thinking of Collateral. I don't know, just all of his films. Like his genius is like that like detachment on the level of words. Like when he's able to actualize it and like focus on like the technical aspects of it, like then it becomes like high art at the same time as it's also like schlocky and enjoyable. I don't know.
No, you're so right, Arturo, because Collateral is a great example where I don't say this to detract from Michael Mann, but I think part of why Collateral works is that both Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx are able to give like incredibly subtle performances, and we know from the writing of Heat 2 that if Michael Mann had to write those scenes, he would literally be like, Tom Cruise is the sexiest guy that ever existed. Jamie Foxx is sexy too, but he doesn't know it, but also he does know it. And it's like, the way he would write Collateral would be sort of dumb and cringe in a way that the way he's able to capture it. Because I actually think Heat's so interesting because we're all overly online, and I feel confident in saying that the leftist people who think they are the most culturally sophisticated also think Heat is a good movie, and probably also think Collateral is a good movie, but they maybe would not like Heat 2 the book because like Mann, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's the studio or his own discipline when he's filming, is able to like show and not tell, and so he can express sort of like unfiltered masculinity aesthetically, whereas in Heat 2 it's like Chris's cock was hard and he's a real man, so he knew what to do with a hard cock. And it's like, I enjoy that, but it's a little silly. And so, exactly as you're saying, Arturo, like that feeling or whatever, Mann is better at capturing that visually than in writing. But in a weird way, like, because I love crime fiction and detective stories and pulp, that's part of why Heat 2 was so satisfying to me, is like I love that sort of unself-conscious, compelling text that's not trying to be cool, that's not trying to be fashionable, is just presenting like a very brute force human story. And there is a quality of that too in the original Heat movie, but clearly he has like an editor or in his own process of transitioning text to screen, he's sort of a genius because like there are no cringe lines in Heat 1. Like to whatever extent he's trying to express some version
Wait, I gotta,
sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
aren't there a lot? But it's just that it's just that when Val Kilmer says them with like in where it's when Val Kilmer says it, where he says it, and how he says it, it works
For
because
me, the
he says stuff
sunrise
like,
sets with her, man.
yeah, for me the sun sets rise. Yeah,
You might be right, Granite. I think part of what I'm observing though is that in Heat 2 there are multiple consecutive paragraphs that are just like cringe masculinity. And the reason Heat the movie works is it'll just be a guy saying 3 words.
Yeah, like writing a
Which-
screenplay is a totally different thing from writing like a novel where you have
Yeah.
paragraphs and paragraphs and pages of like characters' interiority. Like, of course, it's going to come off less cringe when you have an actor able to actualize it. And that's part of why, like, I'm really glad that the movie is getting made, even though, like, I guess I'll say this later. I mean, I'm not 100% sure that like they're going to pull it off given the sort of the size of the challenge. But like, yeah, like reading the book, like, the natural, like your mind is already like making it, they're trying to visualize it as a film, especially considering that you've seen the first one. So I think it makes sense that the cringe factor is reduced when you're working with some of the greatest actors and film talent that have ever lived.
No, you guys are totally right, and that's not a point I acknowledged. I guess I would just say that like in the movie, the cringe masculinity is like some of the greatest actors of all time delivering 7 words and immediately it cuts back to action. Whereas in the book, it'll be like 2 paragraphs.
Yeah.
Or whatever. But
there's a lot of stuff in the book. I mean, I don't think this is quite what you're talking about, but when we were talking back and forth while we were both doing our reading of the book, our listening, I did the audiobook, but one, I think Degree Studies, you mentioned like, there's too much to make into a movie. And so I was kind of looking at like the book length and then the events of the book. There's lots of passages which obviously they're going to save, they don't have to. There's lots of passages where he's like describing gun makes and models, or like car makes and models, or tech products, like what sort of like RAM they have and stuff. Like, we have these new devices with 32 gigabits of RAM, and we're going to sell them for this. Like, that's now obviously none of that's going to like be vocalized in the movie. But do you think there's just too many events in the book to properly convert this to a movie?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, one of the thoughts I had, and I'm curious if you guys thought this, is that I wondered if Michael Mann thought Heat is Godfather 1, and so Heat 2 has to be Godfather 2, where I'm crashing back and forth between
the old country and
between flashbacks and modern day, because I did think, and this is totally fine for the book, but when I thought about could this be a movie, it's like 5 movies, and I don't. I think it's a very good book, and the main message I want to express is my like respect and appreciation for the skill that went into this book, and I want to talk, if we can find space for it, about like the skill of a book that is so propulsive, like a procedural crime or spy novel that just makes you turn the next page, because that's what this book is. And for a person who's a film and TV director to create like a really impressive genre novel that is hard to put down is very impressive. But in terms of the suitability of this audiobook that I listened to be made into a film, it's so long. And granted, you brought up to us that in the first movie, you sort of thought the least compelling part was Neil wanting to kill the serial killer in their crew. I'm forgetting his name.
Well, not that he wanted. Not that he wanted to kill him. I think the thing for me, the part that was least compelling is just that Waingro is a serial killer. It's sort of like, wait, we're in the third act of this movie. Why are we introducing a serial killer? You know,
Yeah.
That's like, I mean, I have Heat's like a 10 out of 10 for me. That's like, everyone knows that, but that's just like one of the minor things where it's like, you know, you could probably take that out. Like if you're going to do, because he ends up being almost 3 hours. And it's like, if you wanted to put that on TV, you know, a TV version of Heat, you're going to take out the Waingro serial killer subplot.
Well, right. I almost think, because since you said that to me, I almost thought that I agree Heat is a 10 out of 10, but maybe in the 11 out of 10, Waingro is just trying to like take the money or something, because I think it does introduce a moral element that has previously not been an issue of the story, and it actually doesn't work. And I think weirdly the same thing happens in Heat 2, where like for me, and Arturo was getting at this, like the most compelling parts of Heat 2 are Chris getting a new life in Paraguay and learning about this new criminal, sort of the intersection of criminalism and capitalism in a weird third world context, and also like what's going on with Hannah. And I actually think the criminal that becomes the main adversary in Heat 2 is very boring. Like as I was listening to Heat 2 in the first scenes in Chicago, where I'm forgetting his last name, but Otis
Wardell.
Yeah, Otis Wardell.
Otis Wardell, this criminal who's doing robberies and raping people. I sort of thought like, oh, this is interesting to show us a case that Hannah is dealing with before he ends up in California. But I never thought, oh, Wardell will end up being the central antagonist of this book. And I think that's my only complaint. I love Heat the movie, and I love Heat 2, the audiobook and novel, but I actually think what's so compelling about this movie and novel is like exploring the lives of criminals, especially criminals who are hyper competent in a bunch of areas that are relevant to the normal economy, and understanding how that works, and understanding how that might make a detective or some other normal member of society relate to them or feel complicated about taking them down. And I think to the extent that in both the film and this book, that like a random malignantly evil serial killer interjects into both plots, it's not the best decision. I mean, as you said, yeah. I think Heat 1 is a great movie, and I think this is a very great, or I don't want to say great, but this is an incredibly engrossing book. But yeah, I think like it's almost funny, like Mann misunderstands what he's doing, because so much of what's compelling is like Neil and Hannah are the same person. And so like the central question is like, okay, you have this obsessive drug addicted cop, and you have a very disciplined but also obsessive criminal. And so it's almost like Neil is the well-adjusted version of this personality, but is nevertheless a criminal. And Hannah is the chaotically adjusted personality, but he's the cop. And that's so interesting. But it's almost like you bail on what's interesting about that moral confrontation and sort of say like, but what they share is they both hate serial killers.
At least he wasn't a racist.
Yeah, and so that's so true, Arturo. It's
like the meme. Like Neil McCauley is like, "Hey, I will kill a bunch of people to knock over a bank, but I would never, ever, ever be a rapist."
Exactly. And it is interesting that was repeated in Heat 2. Like I thought, can we do spoilers now, Granite?
Yeah, I was actually just going to say let's go. We did some modest spoilers. I mean, Chris goes to Paraguay. I mean, you everyone knows Chris survives. And then there's this guy, Otis Wardell. We can go deeper than that.
It's like it's like he missed.
This concludes the free preview. Full version available for paid subscribers of the Granite Mountain Movie Club Substack. Thank you for listening.